Welcome to another Parenting Athletic Kids podcast. We have Paul Weidner on the podcast again today. Welcome back, Paul. Great to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yep, this is going to be fun. So we're talking about, we're going to have starting kind of a new podcast format here. This is going to be a pass it along podcast. So parents that are listening to this podcast is for you. And then we're going to back it up with a podcast talking about similar things that you can then pass along to your athlete. So today we're talking about building routines. We're going to get into 4 kind of areas with building routines. Number 1, the importance of routines. Number 2, when routines are important. Number 3, the different components that are important to have in routines. And then how you can help, how you parents can help. And again, we'll support this, do another podcast just for the athletes that hopefully will pass along to them, and they'll learn all about this as well. So you can be working together to develop these routines as necessary. So Paul, let's jump into this. What is the importance of having great routines?
A routine, the purpose of a routine for me is to bring you back to the same place every single time. I think about how much time and effort and work has been put into developing our physical skills, our physical abilities. And then if you're not able to be in the same place, same good place mentally every single time, which is being present, all the things that we want in a mental state that's good. If you're not able to be there as often as possible, a lot of those physical skills that you've worked so hard to develop kind of get thrown out the window. So a routine is to bring you back to the same place every single time, hopefully same good place every single time. That's why you do them pretty much every single time before a game or before a pitch or whatever, because you're trying to get back to the same place, which is different than like a release, which we've talked about in previous podcasts, which is like, I know I'm feeling really down or something bad emotionally, and I need to release that to get back to the right place. That can happen as bad things are happening. A routine for me is an every time thing, no matter what. If I hit a home run in my last pitch or if I struck out on my last at bat, like you go back to a routine no matter what in either of those two things. So that's the biggest thing for me, to get you back to the same good place every time.
Love it. I think 2 things, really big words, parents. The present moment, right? That's where we want them to play all the time. We've also called it the zone, being in the zone. So the routines can get us to those places, the present moment, the zone, whatever you want to call it, the same place over and over again, a good place, hopefully. So again, I think parents just talking to your son or daughter about when they do feel their best, what does that feel like? So that's a great place to start with this. And then once they recognize that, we start to ask them, do you have routines that allow you to be in that place? And let's jump into, before we kind of get into the components of routines, before the podcast, we talked about 2 big times for this. So when are the times that athletes should have routines?
Yeah, I think that there's pregame and then there's in-game. So pregame is like, you do your pregame stretching routine, you do your journaling, whatever it may be that puts you in the right spot. I'll try not to get too sport specific, but whatever the pregame routine is for you, whether it's you're following your own or following what the team does, a lot of people view pregame routines as only physically getting you ready to play. And a lot of times the repetitive nature of a pregame stretching routine that you do every single time is not just for injury prevention and get you loose and whatever. That same predictable pregame stretching routine, whether you realize it or not, is also very comforting mentally. It puts you in the same place as you always want to be, no matter what. So pregame stretching, great for physical, awesome, also good for mental. Pregame journaling, which I want you to talk about here in a second. And then, so the other component of that is in-game. So in-game is like between each pitch. So pitcher throws a pitch, it's ball 1 on the outside corner, you step out, do something real quick that is part of your routine that you get back in. Or the first pitch of the at-bat as you enter the batter's box, what does that look like? Or you're about to deliver a pitch, you're the pitcher on the mound, you have a routine as a pitcher. Free throw lines, field goal kickers, like they all have routines that they go to that are important for them in game to put them in the present moment, like right now. Pre-game is a little bit more like macro sense. Put yourself in a good place. I think the in-game routine is 100% focused on getting you in the here and now and regulating you right when it matters most. So there's some subtle differences between the two, enough of a difference to talk about them separately. But those are the two areas for me that routines end up happening in competitive sports.
Really good. So I won't elaborate on that. I think you hit it really good. So two spots, and parents, this is what you want to be aware of. Talking to my son or daughter about what are you doing pregame, and we'll get into the components in a second. What are you doing pregame to get in the present moment, get yourself ready to play, get yourself in the zone, and what are you doing in game for those same reasons. So let's get into the components. Let's start with pregame. So parents, this would be a great time to take a couple notes. What components do we want to be mindful of, add to for pregame routines?
Yep. So the stretching part I just talked about, just doing something similar every single time. Obviously, if that's something physical, you need to be physically ready. That's great. You got to make sure you do that. But I would highly encourage athletes to find something from a physical pregame stretching, pregame warm-up routine that is the same every single time. So you know you're going back to the same thing. That's the first thing. The other thing that comes to my mind, other than journaling, which I'm going to let you take, is the ability to find ways to compartmentalize your day. So like for me, if let's say I'm working with a college athlete or a high school athlete, both of those work. They go from school to sports. And if you're not very good at compartmentalizing your day, it's very easy for school to bleed into sports, whether it was a bad test they took, friend issues, whatever it may be, and it bleeds into their ability to stay present in sports. I think it's important for athletes to find something that signals to them, a physical thing that signals to them, this is the start of my sport experience for the day versus my school experience for the day. So a really easy one when I work with athletes, I talk about like, as soon as you put on your cleats, as soon as you put on your basketball shoes, as soon as you put on your football cleats, whatever it may be, the shoes that you're wearing to play that sport, which are no doubt different than the shoes you wear for school, I would think, that is the start of there is no more thoughts about school, period. Or at least that's the goal, right? So if you can find ways to compartmentalize your day as part of your pregame routine, I think that's important too. That gets a little bit off topic of that, but when people are thinking about what goes into putting me in the present moment right now, well, what's detracting from the present moment right now? Is it school? Is it, girlfriend, boyfriend issues? Is it whatever? And then finding hard lines that you can draw with a physical action that says enough of that. That'll be there for me when this is over. Now it's time to be a baseball player, basketball player, football player, gymnast, whatever it may be. So those are the two main things. And then obviously the rest of it's pretty nuanced, like sports specific type stuff. But I want you to take the journaling part right now, because I think that's a super important one, and it helps us try to get in the zone as best we can.
So a couple things just to throw in before I hit the journal a little bit. And again, parents, we'll go through this with the athletes, and maybe you want to watch, tune in to listen to that podcast as well, so you get a little more in depth. So I don't want to get too in depth on that piece, because I want the athletes to really have autonomy in this and take control of this. But parents, you're looking for physical things and mental things that get them ready, get them in the zone, get them in the present moment, whatever they call it, whatever you want to call it, get them ready to play. They feel like they're in a good headspace. They're ready to go. So I think most athletes and through their coaches have built up the physical piece of this, the routines, whether it's a dynamic warm-up, whether it's foam rolling, whether it's bands, whatever it is, the physical component usually is there. And even youth coaches are generally pretty good at that. The mental component is not there. And this can be totally different for different athletes. So I think, again, the parents, the first thing you should do is ask your athlete, how do you feel before the games? I feel great. Okay, keep doing what you're doing. Maybe write down some things that you're doing for if there's a day that you don't feel great, you can lean into those things. So this isn't cookie cutter, one size fits all. If a kid feels great pregame and feels that way 95% of the time, let's just write those things down. And maybe they're doing some different things. It doesn't have to be, cut and dry exactly the same thing. And I know in youth sports, right, sometimes we get a chance to go warm up. Sometimes we're in a tournament and we don't. So maybe one or two physical and mental things that help them to feel really good. So let's start with that. Mental things that they can do. And we've done a ton of podcasts on all these things. So revert back to those if you need to, parents. The journaling piece. So writing down what I'm going to focus on in the game today, controllable things. That helps me settle in, get in the present moment, understand what I'm trying to do. We've also talked about with some athletes writing goals for the game. But again, that should circle back to controllable things at some point. I'm not going to get into deep in that. We did a whole podcast on that. I like what Paul said about just tying my shoes. I'm ready to go. Positive self-talk. It's going to be a great day. I'm grateful to be here. We've talked a lot about that in other podcasts as well. So there's a bunch of different ways, but the mental component usually goes unnoticed, untouched. Make sure we're doing one or two things, whether it's just, I'm going to have a great day today. This is going to be so fun. Whatever it is, positive self-talk. We can get into meditation. Look at the Alan Jagger podcast for meditation, mindfulness, just the shoe tie, whatever it might be. So start encouraging the kids to have some type of mental piece to their pregame. That's all I'm going to say on that. But we will get into this a little deeper with the athlete. Awesome. So let's go to the in game. So pregame, we're just trying to feel good, be in the moment, compartmentalize, put these schools behind us, whatever it might be. And again, I think the best way to do this, parents, is just ask your son or daughter, where they're at. They feel good. If not, let's try a few of these things. Let's throw these things in. Okay. In game. So this will look different, as Paul said, for different athletes, whether you're a gymnast or a golfer, a baseball player. We're going to kind of generalize this, but hit us with the in-game components.
I'll go back to this. The statement of an athlete's worst enemy mentally tends to be frustrations about the past or fears about the future. And I've always found that in-game routines, a huge part of what they accomplish for you is trying to make sure that those are not entering your mind as much as possible. You don't have to be perfect at it, but just as much as possible. Frustrations about the past and fears about the future are not at play when I have to perform right now. So for baseball, which I know we talk mostly about, try not to be too sport specific on this, but the value of a good breath is huge, right? So you deep inhale through the nose, hard exhale through the mouth, gets an oxygen spike in our body, helps get, blood flow into the right parts of our brain. And we're in a great place to reduce that fight or flight and that anxiety that we may have. So really good inhale, really good exhale. Try to do that as a part of your routine in game as often as possible, whatever that may look like. Looking at something intently that's not moving. So for a baseball player, that can be the bat that you're holding in your hand, and you're looking at something on that bat that's really intently or really small. Looking at that really intently brings all of your attention to something that's right in front of you, which then inherently brings all of your attention to the here and now, not something that's happening in the past or future. So the breath, the focal point, something you've talked about, Trav, called a final thought, or like a convicted thought, whatever that may be, of just a self-talk that has a lot of value in the here and now. Maybe instead of like the big picture self-talk about, you deserve this, whatever that may be, but like the right now, something that's helpful, something that's positive, something that's energetic that you can implement right now. Those are in-game type self-talk measures that you can take. Those are the three that come to my mind. I know like in basketball, when you're shooting free throws, you have a certain number of dribbles that you take that just puts you in the same spot every single time. Then you're looking at a certain thing on the backboard or as a part of the rim. Those are in-game routines too. So the list kind of goes on and on about sport-specific different things. But in general, to stay general enough, anything that makes it so you are focused on the here and now and regulated as best you can in the here and now is what routines do for you in game.
Really good. And to Paul's point, this will be different for different athletes and certainly in different sports. Again, parents, I would suggest you ask your son or daughter right before they're about to go to the plate, hit the golf ball, hop on the balance beam, whatever it is, how are they feeling in that moment? I feel great. Like I'm just doing great. Okay. Again, what are you thinking about? So in case a time comes up when you're not, you can go to those things. And again, I think there's a physical component to this and a mental. Again, the physical is usually pretty well covered. I know guys guys and gals on deck are taking swings with the weighted bat, things they've done over and over again. So those are generally covered. I love all the things Paul said. Maybe we start incorporating a breath. Maybe it's a focal point. Maybe it's positive self-talk or the final thought being positive right before we go to the plate. This is going to be awesome. Take my best swings, whatever it might be. Maybe a little visualization, depending on how much time the athlete has. If you're on deck and you have a little bit of time, you can visualize what your swing is going to look like. I know gymnasts will sit and visualize, close their eyes and visualize their routine. So there's different components to that. And again, we're not going to get into all those. Past videos have covered those, and we'll talk about it a little bit more with the athletes. But just asking your son or daughter, how do you feel right before the at-bat, right before you hit the golf ball, whatever it might be? I'm good. Awesome. What are you thinking about? Just so we can reiterate it. I don't feel that good. Sometimes I feel good. Sometimes I don't. Well, when you are feeling good, what are you doing? Or I'm not really sure. All right, let's talk about that. What mental components do you want to put in? A focal point, a deep breath, positive self-talk, a little visualization, whatever it might be. Really good. Anything? So we've got the pregame components, mental, physical. Let's touch with the athletes, the mental piece. Let's make sure they're doing one or two things: journaling, self-talk, getting themselves in the present moment, all those things. And then in game, let's talk about physically and mentally what they're doing as well. Anything to add to that?
Nope.
So last piece, how can parents help this? I think I've said it a few times. Have conversations. Anything else you would add to how parents can help their son or daughter develop really good routines?
Yeah. Not to call it out at the time, because there's a time for them to just let it go. Like, let them be playing, let them do their thing. You're just there to be a support system. That's all it is. But for you to recognize and understand what some of those routines are with your athlete through conversation and through being able to see it, and then being able to use how well they did their routine or not as one of the ways that you can have a healthy post-game conversation that's not results-based. It's a controllable-based thing. That's how I think this can be used from a player and parent conversation standpoint. Because whether or not you did a routine in the batter's box, at the free throw line, whatever that may be, to put yourself in the best chance of having success, or with the best chance of having success, is a completely controllable thing. And so when you're trying to figure out what you want to talk about post-game, because you don't want to talk about how many times they struck out or how many shots they missed, because that's not a very healthy car ride, talking about things that are controllable tends to be a little bit easier. You pick your time and place regardless, but it's certainly not shouting it out to them while they're playing. But when you're talking about it after the game, at home, car ride, whatever it may be, focusing on controllables should be the basis of the conversation. So their effort, their energy, their enthusiasm, the controllable things like a routine, like bring those things up when you're having conversations with your athletes more than you bring up how they actually did in the game from performance-based standpoint.
Really good. And you briefly touched on this, but as Paul's mentioned many times, this also takes back, why are we doing this? We're doing this to give ourselves the best chance of success. It's not Sunday softball, as Paul likes to say. Like, we do these routines. These routines are like building blocks to give ourselves the best chance of success when we hit the golf ball, when we step into the box. So that's where it all starts. But it doesn't necessarily guarantee success. Not a perfect 10 on the balance beam, not a 350-yard drive right down the middle. But this is what we go back to time and time again. When athletes talk to me about, I was 0 for 4, I was like, how was your routines? Mentally, were you good? Physically, were you good? Is there anything that needs to change? And again, this is different for different athletes, but great conversations. They don't get upset about it. They're open arm, want to learn. Okay, what can I do differently? So really good. Let me also say, these routines, although they are controllable, when we get knocked out of our routines, when something bad happens, we struggle to control them. So be aware of that as parents. You can't say, well, I saw you speed up. You shouldn't do that. It's 100% controllable. No, if they struck out on a pitch 10 inches outside and the umpire banged them, they're going to be a little bit upset and have a hard time getting into routines. Or let's say that's strike 2. Like you're going to see them speed up in their routines going into the next pitch probably. Like college players do this, pro players do this, right? Like that sucked. And I need to try to get back to my routine. So again, to Paul's point, this is great things to talk about. Were you able to get back to your routine after some adversity, after something bad happened? Were you be able to stay in your routines in all 4 at-bats? How many shots do we hit in golf? Like I know I hit about 110. Good golfer, 70? Each time, were you able to commit to your routine? That's fantastic. Or did you duff one and then kind of got outside of your physical and mental routines? So really, really big stuff there. Awesome. We'll start wrapping this puppy up, Paul. I think we killed it on that one. Anything you'd like to add coming down the stretch here?
Nope. I think that was great.
Awesome. So parents, again, really quick. We went through the importance of routines, when we need routines, pre-game and in-game, different components, physical and mental components, and then how you can help on this. Again, I think the best place to start isn't just present, here's what you should do with your son or daughter, here's what they should be doing. Ask them how they are doing. And if they're doing great, leave it alone. And or ask them what things they think about do to make it go so great so they can revisit those things when it's not. If it's not going great, pre-game, end-game, let's have a discussion about things that they can add in physically and mentally to give themselves the best chance of success. Love it. So again, this is going to be a pass it along podcast. Paul and I, right now, we're going to record one for the athletes, and shortly after we share this one with the parents, we're going to share one with the athletes as well. Thanks again, Paul. We'll wrap this one up. Paul, we'll see you again really soon.
Yep. See you soon. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. Please be sure to like, follow, and especially share the podcast. If you want more information on strategies that you can use to help optimize your son or daughter's athletic experience, please check out my book, Parenting Athletic Kids. It's available on Amazon. Thanks again, and we'll be back with another podcast really soon.